Hey, what is going on, WBE fans? It is General Tartle bringing you the pick'ems for Week 12 once again, and as always, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, CJ, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the people.
Hey people, it's your friend Choice CJ here, and I'm so happy to be doing this again with my buddy Ben. We've been at this for almost 11 weeks, now 12 weeks. This is insane. This is crunch time, Ben.
It really is, and it's really getting down to it, and these games this week are to prove it. Everyone's trying to make their way into playoffs if they can. Other teams are just trying to do their best just so they can look like they have a pretty solid record overall for the season. But when it comes down to it for the results of Week 11, unfortunately, we still have games on the delay. I think we're only missing 2 games, but we're still going to hold off for that reason. So we're not going to be showing the records of last week and how everyone's doing in their pick'ems. We're going to save that for the last week, but we will try to get everything set out by the next week or right before playoffs, just so y'all do get a final update of how all the analysts did and everything like that. But once again, we can get right down to the game since we don't have to worry about that. So CJ, do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to kick things off with a pretty spicy matchup between the Miami Dolphins, coached by Kyle A., and the Bullet Punch Club, coached by the Uzi Gunner. Once again, I feel like I've been saying it each week. Uzi's been on a tear since he's joined WBE. He's only dropped 1 game. He's 5-1. And I think this is another nice matchup for him. Kyle's got, obviously, the double weather core, but I really like Licky Licky here with the ability Cloud 9, being able to neutralize the effects of weather. So I think that is definitely going to come to try and neutralize those threats. There's just some like good defensive options for the weather sweepers anyway. Like Tapu Fini, for example, is like a really good response for Kingdra. Amoonguss is a pretty good response for Victory Bell, especially if you put Akaberry on it for that very obvious weather boosted weather ball, like the sun boosted weather ball. So yeah, I just don't think that there's much potential offensively with the weather. I think a better win con would be a Calm Mind Rest Talk Cresselia, because there are no dark types on Uzi's team. There's only 1 psychic resist, and that is Uxie. So I think that would be a very good way to try and set up and win. Conversely, Uxie with a Calm Mind Rest Talk set would also be very good versus Kyle, because Kyle is in much of the same situation. His only psychic resist is Cresselia. So I think that would be a really nice way to try and win the game as well. And it's funny, on neither side do they have super effective stab options for opposing psychic types. There's no bug type, ghost type, or dark type on either side here. So I just think that that's really funny to note. I'm definitely expecting a Calm Mind War to show up in this game. Otherwise, for Uzi, I think just like a pretty simple Mega Aerodactyl with Stone Edge and Earthquake looks really strong. Just because it hits the majority of Kyle's team, there's really nothing that switches into that. And that gives him some nice options for those last 2 slots. He can run like Taunt Roost, Stealth Rocks plus Roost, Hone Claws, Defog, anything like that. Aerodactyl is just very nice here. It's true that it can be revenge killed by Kingdra, but as I mentioned, I don't think Kingdra has a very good matchup here. Kyle has been able to pull out a couple of wins in the last few weeks, but I am going to be favoring Uzi and his generally better matchup and just his generally better hot streak here. And it looks like all of the analysts and fans are going to be leaning in that favor as well. You're actually locking in our good buddy Uzi here, Ben.
So I had to go with Uzi purely because of how well he's just been doing so far. Overall, his team is just very balanced, and even though Kyle has been on the up lately, I just feel like his weather is not going to work that well versus the Cloud9 Licky that you mentioned, and just overall, I'm a big fan of Mega Arrow, and I feel like we'll do plenty of work this week. For the next match, we have the San Diego Chin Chargers, coached by Lord Envy, going up against the Sin City Scissors and Patty Trills. For this matchup, I see Drapion being a great counter to Zam, while also providing T-Spikes, which is going to be very big. Golbat's probably going to be the most ideal defogger for this matchup, if there is going to be one, but the Sin City Scissors still end up struggling with T-Spikes, and Golbat can be pressured pretty easily, I believe. Lando T, however, for the Scissors is going to be pretty solid offensively, but would probably benefit the most from being Scarf purely to help deal with Pokemon such as Sceptile, Victini, and Dugtrio, Mega Sceptile to be more specific. While Incineroar is a very solid in this matchup to help deal with the Victini and Sceptile, basically being like almost a hard counter to Victini in general, and provides you U-turn momentum, while also you might want to pack a Shed Shell on it purely so you don't get trapped by Dugtrio, catch him a little bit off guard, and then you can easily switch into one of your ideal counters for Dugtrio and maybe something like Ferrothorn or Lando T, so that will really benefit you in the long run. Lastly, special offensive Sceptile is going to be doing very solid with Leaf Storm, Dragon Pulse, HP Fire, and then really the fourth move is a big toss-up. You can have Earthquake for like Incineroar, you can have Substitute just to sit you behind that sub and like really take a hit from anything. Work up if you want to just, you know, get your stats up. And Giga Drain is pretty helpful because you get health back while also having a strong grass type move while not having the risk of missing nor lowering your special attack like you do with Leaf Storm. So you can benefit a lot in that fourth slot, but overall I feel like the Mega Sceptile with the special offensive coverage is going to be very beneficial in this matchup in general. So when it came down to it, I had to go with the San Diego Chimchargers and Lord Envy. It's really hard to go against him. Patty has had an amazing season so far with this really godlike squad, so kudos to him for that. But Envy's just been playing exceptionally well, and he's really comfortable with his team, and he proves it every week. So I had to go with the Chimchargers. The majority of the analysts go in favor of the Chimchargers as well. We do have, of course, AA around 2420 locking in the Sin City Scissors versus Lord Envy, and we also have Kraselki going in favor of the Sin City Scissors as well. CJ, you want to give any more feedback on this?
No, I don't have too much to add. Yeah, like it is tough to pick against Patty in this situation. He's had a good season, coming off a nice win last week and a good upset victory over Under the Radar in the week before that. But Envy's is the top overall team this season, arguably. Basically, him and Gator are right there in terms of like who's got the best record and best performance. So I just can't be compelled to pick against Envy when he's shown such a good performance. The next game is going to be between the New York Noibats, coached by Mewtwo fan Nate, and the Melbourne Rotoms, coached by Cybertron. So for Aaron, aka Cybertron, I think Mamoswine is really crucial in this matchup. Mamoswine is always really great for applying a ton of offensive pressure, and certainly there's really no switch in from Nate to Mamoswine in this matchup, but I really like just something like Life Orb, Ice Shard to deal with the three fastest Mons on Nate's team, being Swellow, Thundurus, and Hydreigon. Of course, all those Pokemon take super effective damage from Ice Shard, so if he wants to have any sort of cheeky sets on Thundurus, like, you know, setup options, Nasty Plot, Agility, etc., having the safe Mamoswine in the back to revenge kill that is really nice. Another Pokemon I see as being really critical for Aaron in this game is Mega Slowbro. I think it's really a crucial Mon for switching into Lucario and Cloyster. But I think if I were Nate, I would try and take advantage of how pressured Slowbro is and try and make some smart doubles into Hydreigon and Thundurus, both of which really threaten that Mega Slowbro. And then maybe, yeah, try and get some momentum, use U-turn spam and things like that to get ahead in this game. I think Aaron's best overall offensive threat, besides like the Mamoswine that I mentioned, would be Aselgor with Choice Specs, because you can just run Bug Buzz, Sludge Bomb, Focus Blast, and hit pretty much everything on the team except for like Dust Noir pretty hard. Then you just put U-turn in the last slot to get some momentum and just apply general pressure. I think that that's a really nice option here. There's definitely some good options on Nate's side offensively. Like Lucario is pretty scary. It's a little tough for Lucario because it does want lots of coverage. It'd like to have E-Speed for the Aselgor, Vacuum Wave for Cortana, Close Combat for the normal types, maybe like Dark Pulse or Crunch for Slowbro, Meteor Mash for Aromatisse. So I don't know what coverage moves he's going to forego. And, you know, it would, of course, be really nice if he could put some sort of setup option in there. But, again, that means that he's missing 2 of those 5 coverage moves that he otherwise would really want. Cheeky option would potentially be like a Nasty Plot Trick Room Slowking with Scald and Signal Beam. The Signal Beam being a good way to hit, like, Guzzlord, Slowbro, and things like that. It hits Kartana neutrally. I'm sure, like, it does, like, 80% to Kartana. I guess, like, Blissey is going to be the major issue for a set like that. So we'll have to see. I'm going in favor of Nate this game. He has not had a super successful season, but I think that he just has a little bit more motivation than Aaron in this game. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but Aaron's been traveling so much and hasn't really been able to, like, focus so much on these games. Like, I think his games are one of the ones that have been a little slow to come through to the league here. So, like, I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say. It's no shade towards Aaron, but I think that Nate has a really nice chance to pull off what's seemingly an upset here. Do you have anything to add to that, Ben?
Nothing more, just to elaborate, of course, on the Melbourne Rotoms and Aaron missing the games. He's basically doing 3 games all in 1 week because he has been a busy bee. So even though it's unfortunate on his part that he's not really taking the games, or he doesn't have as much as time to prep and be well prepared for games as some of the other coaches, I know Nate takes some decent time every week to make sure he has a decent matchup, gets input from everyone. So I had to go with Nate for that reason. Also, he's just been doing pretty well, and I do like some of the offense that he carries. I feel like the offense is a little bit more present than the Melbourne Rotoms. You do have to be aware of like the priority helping out with some versus the Noibats offense. Like you mentioned, the Manoswine for like Thunderous and Swellow, but you also have like potential Conkeldar helping out versus the Lucario and Hydreigon with like Mach Punch and stuff like that. So even though it's fairly balanced in the matchup, I'm gonna have to go with my boy Nate this week. For the next match, we have the Atlanta Umbriels, coached by Fanatax, going up against the Adelaide Haunch Crows and Bill Standish. Something drops to Lando I, plain and simple. Basically, a Life Orb mix does tremendous damage, and in general, it struggles switching into Earth Power for the team. Torn and Flygon, yes, are immunities to ground typing, but they're just a big risk because they're generally frail Mons and will be taking a lot of damage if they're hit by anything else. Flygon, I feel like, will be a main Revenger and a decent attack Mon in general if it comes, so you really don't want to risk that thing taking too much damage. But as for Lando I, you could run just 3 attacks sub, very straightforward. Earth Power, knock off HP Ice is basically all you really need, I'd say. It puts in plenty of work versus the team, and can definitely weaken it down for like something in the back. As for the Atlanta Umbreons, Mega Gardevoir has a decent matchup. Of course, the obvious switch-in is the Mega Scizor, really crippling it with the Bullet Punch priority and everything of the sort. But once it drops, or that it's Stealth with, Mega Gardevoir actually puts in a lot of work, and like honestly, only a better counter at the end is like Biapa Berry Tentacruel or something of the sort, maybe like Scarf Tentacruel to Revenge, which would actually be pretty cool to see, because if he doesn't Scarf it, it comes down to a speed tie between Mega Gardevoir and Tentacruel, both tied at that base 100 speed. So that'd be pretty interesting to see. Other than that, Bandit Entei actually puts in a lot of damage. A very standard set for Entei, but forcing Primarina to become defensive in this matchup is actually very important, because then you have to don't worry about a very scary like Choice Specs Primarina, which most people are afraid of when they look at matchups. But apart from that, Sacred Fire is really just spamming if like the Primarina is not there, or it's more of an offensive and you're able to just to 2-hit KO it. So I feel like the Umbreons can really capitalize on Bandit Entei if they do see that opportunity. So when it came down to it this week, I decided to vote in favor of the Adelaide Haunch Crows, actually. And Bill Standish, I just feel like he's more likely to do better this week against the Umbreons, who haven't had the best season, I'd have to say. And I feel like Bill might be able to pull it out here, even though he's still getting used to the team as he picked it up a little bit late compared to everyone else. As for the analysts, it's pretty split. I'd say it's about 50-50. It looks like it's 4v7 with the fans at home actually voting in favor of the the Atlanta Umbreons for you guys at home. So pretty straightforward. CJ, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. I like the option of potentially an offensive Necrozma in this game as well, to take advantage of the fact that there's no Dark type on Christian's side. Otherwise, I like your analysis talking about the Scizor and the Gardevoir and things like that. I also am going in favor of build this game, so got my fingers crossed for my Australian buddy there. The next match features the Durham Druddigons, coached by 6-foot Hacks, aka Leo, and the Chicago Cub Chews, coached by Galactic Elliot. There are definitely a lack of Lopunny responses on Elliot's side, especially once Stealth Rocks get up. The only like really good resists, or I guess not even good resists, the only sort of like type resists to High Jump Kick are going to be the Mantine, the Rotom Fan, and the Scolipede. And of course, all of those 3 Mons are weak to rocks. None of them are very like that physically bulky. So like they're not really going to want to switch in on the combination of rocks plus High Jump Kick plus return. I bet that knocks each of them out. The Trick Room Uniclus also looks very good in this game. Manaphy also looks very good because it kind of can just run Scald and Ice Beam and be able to deal with most of Elliot's team. It could potentially like go Hidden Power Electric in the last slot if it wants to do the most amount of damage to Mantine. But it might be a good idea to run like Z-Rain or something like that. So that way Manaphy has the chance to outspeed like Ninetales and Scolipede and things like that. The only real defense that Elliot has is like a Mantine that has Haze or something like that with like a big special defense stat. So we'll have to see. The only other issue for Manaphy I see is that it does kind of want to be bulky this week to deal with Sand Slash, unless Leo decides to bring a Water Still Volley to take some pressure off of that. For Elliot's side, I actually kind of like Bulk Up Girder. I think that that has a lot of potential in this game. The only thing that kind of stops it is Moltres, but there's not guaranteed that Moltres comes. Like, it's a good mon on its own, but that 4x weakness to rocks just makes it hard to bring to a lot of games, I feel like. And so if that Pokemon doesn't come, then Drain Punch plus Knockoff plus Mach Punch pretty much deals with everything. Like, the Mach Punch there for Lopunny and Tauros is really, really nice. Knockoff to hit Reuniclus, and then Drain Punch to get some nice recovery offers. It's like Steelix, Cradily, Como-O, even Muck. So I think that looks pretty solid. In terms of the choosing who's going to win, I am going to be leaning in favor of Leo here. He's just, shows that he's got a very good grasp of how his team functions, and has a good performance this season. And I think the matchup is in his favor. Like, Elliot can always pull off a surprise with his team, with Scolipede and Ninetales. You never know what might happen, but I just like Leo in this game. It looks like most of the analysts and fans are going that direction as well. Chris Cobain is the only one who's picking Elliot in this one. We are both on the same page here. It looks like Ben picking Leo.
Yeah, once again, I can't go against Leo. Good buddy. He does great every week, and he's definitely looking like a strong potential contender in playoffs for the potential champion belt. So I'm looking forward to see how well he can do there. But apart from that, I really just think Leo's going to take this week. I love Elliot to death as well, but I don't really feel like he can take it versus Leo's team as how solid it is in general and how well Leo has been doing. That Girder is definitely likely, especially considering he brought it last week versus MV. So we might be able to see that big boy put in work with the Mach Punches and everything like you mentioned. For the next match, we have the Pittsburgh Pirates, coached by Old Man Tup, going up against the Seattle Sea Kings and Jodor. First off, when I look at this matchup, Guts, Flame Orb, Hariyama absolutely destroys Jodor's bulk. Of course, the fighting stat pairing up very well against Umbreon and the Avalugg, but in general, a Facade is very hard to switch into. Sigilif and Megavino typically, of course, resist the stabs on Hariyama for the fighting coverage, but they're not going to do so well versus a Facade that is very strong with Guts Flame Orb in general, so they have to be very aware of that. And Mega Charizard X doesn't really have the potential of sweeping the team, but does a very good job of just breaking apart the fat little by little. Maybe so Hariyama can just really just pick up a Oko or just weaken the team in general for something else that they have set in the back. As for the opposing fire type, and Infernape also has an amazing matchup, I do believe. Can be easily mixed with HP Ice to 2-hit KO or Gliscor. You can just run, of course, Close Combat, Flare Blitz, HP Ice, and then a fill-in. In general, I feel like that's very solid for Infernape. The best counter being, of course, Rotom Wash. But, of course, Rotom Wash not having reliable recovery, apart from maybe like an Ipapa Berry, 50% Berry, something like that. It's not really going to be able to switch in way too much, even though it is really bulky. You have to be careful how many times you switch that thing in if you're not able to give it reliable recovery. So they have to be aware of that, because Infernape is going to be an issue if you let that thing take too much damage. Overall, I truly do believe it's a fairly even matchup, and both these teams do have similar records. There wasn't really too much I could really say about the matchup overall. It's fairly balanced between the offense and the bulk. There wasn't really too many things else I could really highlight in all honesty, but when it came down to the teams, I was leaning towards the Pittsburgh Pirates, but I really just opted to go for Jodor. This was more of my toss-up for every week, so I decided to go on the other end and decided to go for Jodor, which I typically haven't done in the past, so hopefully it doesn't let me down. As for the rest of the analysts, they decided to go kind of 50-50. It's 4 teams in favor of the Seattle Sea Kings, and then the remainder of the analysts going in favor of the Pittsburgh Pirates, as well as the fans going in favor of Old Man Tup this week. CJ, do you want to tell me why you decided to go for Tup this week instead?
Yeah, I think it could have gone either way for sure. I just still have that 6-0 loss to Kyle A kind of stuck in my head for Jodor, so that just kind of makes me more predisposed to his opponents. There's definitely some scary potential for Joe to get like a quick win versus with like a belly drum Slurpuff or something like that. Responses to that are kind of limited. I basically need to rely on like T-Wave Klefki to try and handle that. So we'll have to see. I like that Hariyama set that you mentioned, because I think Facade is going to be really nice for breaking Mega Venusaur, which is otherwise a little problematic for Tup. Like, otherwise he only has Musharna to like really hit it with super effective stab, just because Gliscor doesn't have very good flying type stab to hit it. So I guess Mega Charizard X is a pretty good switch into Venusaur most times, but it's just sort of hard to rely on Charizard in that way, because like Venusaur could probably take one unless the Charizard's boosted. Maybe he brings like an SD Charizard or something like that to try and take advantage of Venusaur. So yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from. I just chose to go with Tup instead. The next matchup is going to be between the Florida Gators, coached by It's Gator, and his opponent, of course, is the Maryland Terrapins, coached by Under the Radar. I think this is a really nice matchup for Bulk Up Zeraora. I've called that out a few times this season, but I think this is definitely another situation where that holds true. Just run like Plasma Fist plus Fire Punch, plus a Dragon move of your choice, either Dual Chop or Outrage, and then for your item slot, run either Life Orb or Dragonium Z. The Fire Punch is going to be able to do good damage to Superior, and it actually does a good chunk of damage to Raichu too, if you're at a +1 boost, so you have a Life Orb. I think it does like 95% minimum or something like that. And then you can run your Dragon move to hit the Zygarde. So I think the only like pseudo check to a set like that would be Scarf Darmanitan. But of course, with Bulk Up, you are boosting your defense at the same time. So if you get that +1 boost off, Zeraora does not get one shot by Darmanitan. If you get 2 boosts up, it only does like 65% max versus a non-HP invested Zeraora. Of course, Zeraora with its speed tier does have the option to run quite a bit of bulk this week if Gator does choose to. Gator's Heatran is pressured quite a bit this game defensively because it does want to switch into like Superior and Darmanitan and things like that. But it's tough because it does also want to pack like Solar Beam for dealing with Milotic, which is like very natural switch into the Heatran. So does he choose to go with like Grass Z or Power Herb to try and hit the Milotic in combination with like Magma Storm or something like that? Or does it run Chop Up Berry or Shook Up Berry to deal with like Darmanitan or Superior? We'll have to see which Gator chooses to do there. On Kelly's side, obviously you have something like Sub Dragon Dance Zygarde that looks very good. You only need 1,000 arrows, and then Outrage with Dragonium Z. I like the Dragonium Z to nuke the Mega Heracross and the Celebi if the need arises. Scarf Mesprit looks a little interesting. Like, I don't know if I necessarily describe that as a win con, but the Psychic Resists just aren't that amazing from Gator. You have like Heatran, which can obviously you can easily pack Hidden Power Ground for that in terms of coverage, and then you have Celebi there as well. So maybe you just run like Signal Beam in the next slot to hit that. So I think there's some cheeky options there. Obviously, you can then run U-Turn in the last slot to gain momentum. And finally, I also like a Calm Mind Mega Sableye with Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse is pretty free versus Gator's team. The only resists being like Keldeo and Mega Heracross. But with the secondary ghost typing that Sableye has, of course, Heracross and Keldeo don't have that much that they can do to Sableye. Like, they can't really threaten it that much. This is one of the hardest matches for me to pick the whole season. Because Kelly is a really talented battler, one of my best friends in the community, but I don't think that you can pick against Gator here. The matchup isn't too strong either way, and Gator's just been tearing it up, as much as Kelly has been as well. Like, Gator is just, you know, probably one of the top 2 battlers in the league this season, so I was forced to kind of go with him. We got a couple of folks that were picking Kelly this week. It looks like we got three analysts going there, but everyone else, including you, Ben, are going in favor of Gator.
Don't tell Kelly I'm voting against him again.
I won't if you don't.
But yeah, I love Kelly to death, but Gator's just been doing almost perfect this season, basically. He's had the second longest win streak, of course, apart from Joey, who's undefeated. Gator lost his first game to Patty Trills, and then he just went like 9-0 as of the records right now. So basically, he's been undefeated since week 1. So that's just really hard to vote against. And in general, I feel like his team is just more of a threat. I do like Kelly's team, but he's just been having less luck as of lately. And Gator's just been having all the luck. Not in terms, of course, hacks or anything, just in general performance. So I have to give it to Gator this week, even though Kelly is an amazing battler. For the next match, we have the Minnesota Vikings coached by Dan, aka A-Drive, going against the Milwaukee Bewares and Wolfie Glick. One of the other major games for this week, probably along the Florida Gators and Maryland Terrapins. So these are some of the ones that you definitely have to look out for. For this matchup, Gengar plus Tornadus does such great damage versus the Vikings team. Torn has amazing coverage that it can really pair versus the Fat that Dan typically brings almost every week. It doesn't really change too much between the Florges, the Skarmory, and the Gastrodon. As well as it pairs with great momentum, of course, having the U-turn. That way you can bring Gengar in and Gengar can just wall break. As for Gengar, you just have Life Orb with stabs, and then like Thunderbolt and Energy Ball, and overall you're basically hitting all of the bulk that Dan brings, as well as just overall covering everything except for the things that are going to outspeed Gengar, which you don't want to worry about or keep Gengar inverses. As for the Vikavolt, Mega Manectric, because I feel like it's going to be pretty important in this matchup. It's the main check to Torn while also being a great pivot and having good coverage for the majority of the team. Of course, you have like the fire coverage in order to hit Excadrill, which would be pretty important if Excadrill is outside of Sand or if it's not Scarfed. Always Volt Switch out versus Gigalith. You really don't want Mega Manectric to take too much chip. This is including Sand, Rocks, or any move that you might want to just keep it in versus. Dan gets a little bit ahead of himself sometimes and will let Mega Manectric stay in. I'm thinking of a recent one where he had Manectric get into the red purely so he can get momentum with like Volt Switch, which is good in most cases, but I feel like you have to keep Manectric healthy in this matchup because it is very solid. Because if you're able to Volt Switch, you're able to get Kyurem Black in, which is very difficult for the the Bewares to switch into as well. Basically, just the coverage of Ice, Electric, and Ground basically deals with everything. I would love to see a Magnet pull Alolan Golem, however, on the Milwaukee Bewares to deal with the Skarmory that the Vikavolts have in order to let Sandrush Excadrill basically sweep versus the Vikavolts. I feel like that'd be very neat to see because we don't see a lot versus Alolan Golem, of course. Some people might forget it as Magnet Pull. I'm sure Dan won't oversee that basically in team prep and he will be aware of it. But he didn't bring Shed Shell last time versus a Magneton, so I don't know if they'll technically bring it versus an Alolan Golem. So we have to be aware of that going into this week. But either way, this is going to be a really good match, and I'm looking forward to it. But as for me, I have to actually vote in favor of the Milwaukee Bewares and Wolfie Glick. Even though both of these teams have been on top of it, period, and their teams are very solid in general, I just feel like Wolfie's going to have a slightly better edge, and Dan's team is a little bit easier to predict based off how he's been like bringing everything the last few weeks. Gastron's always just about has a Rindo Berry and everything of the sort. Skarmory, he doesn't play that efficiently, I have to say. He mainly relies on Mega Manectric and Kyurem Black and Gastrodon when it comes down to it. And that's how I see it, at least. So if Wolfie's able to capitalize on that, I feel like that's going to be pretty big. As for the other analysts, it's pretty split. We have about 4 analysts going in favor of Dan, however, while you guys at home also decided to vote in favor of the Vikavolts. CJ, you want to tell me why you decided to go for Wolfie this week?
Yeah, in terms of the Mons, I think it's pretty evenly matched. Like there's Kyurem Black applying a lot of offensive pressure, basically forcing like Blastoise to be defensive or things like that. Excadrill is definitely very scary, forces the Skarmory to come. I think like the matchup is pretty even. If there's one coach who's had Dan's number in WBE, it's Wolfie Glick. Going back to like season 1, getting the upset championship win over Dan. And just ever since then, it seems like Wolfie's been one step ahead. And so I guess based on my vote, I'm saying I expect that to continue. I'm sure that Dan's very motivated to change that. But I think just until that happens, I'm going to be picking Wolfie to continue the trend, if that makes sense. The next game is going to be between the Rochester Rhydons and Iron Boffin. And the other team is, of course, the New York Marauders, coached by Mr. Talent. There's a couple of pretty standard, solid-looking win cons here in this game. Dragon Dance Mega Altaria, just with ground coverage to take on Empoleon, and Nihilego and Houndoom looks pretty nice. Calm Mind Restock Suicune looks really nice. There's really nothing stopping a Calm Mind Restock Suicune except like maybe Trick Latios or something like that. So those are like not very creative options, but I think they're standard here, or they're solid here despite being standard. Weavile looks pretty good with like a lure set. So I think the 2 best switch-ins to Weavile in this game are going to be the Buzzwole and then the Gyarados. And so I think running like Aerial Ace for the Buzzwole will be pretty cool. And if he really wants to be spicy for the Gyarados, I would run Natural Gift Electric, and that would be able to hit that thing for quite a bit of damage. It's not really going to want to switch in on the combination of Icicle Shard plus Natural Gift Electric, especially if rocks are up. You can kind of say the same for Buzzwole. If it comes in on rocks plus Icicle Crash plus Aerial Ace, it's definitely not appreciated. Another big threat for Iron Boffin this game is going to be a defensive Shaman. There's just not a lot of really great ways for Drew to break through it. Like it can wall, pretty well, like Gyarados, Empoleon, Latias, things like that. Like the only like good super effective stab option to hit it with is Nihilego. but I think that Nihilego's a little tricky here because it is fairly easily pursuit trapped by regular Metagross. The only option to hit that Metagross would be like foul play. But like staying in on a Metagross when it can threaten with Bullet Punch is pretty bold, so I'm not sure that he'll make that choice. Houndoom could come to threaten that Shaman, but Houndoom is just not a very good Pokemon in general, and it's stopped fairly easily by Mega Altaria and Suicune in this game. That's not to say that Drew doesn't have any good options. I think Dragon Dance Gyarados with Ice Fang and Crunch coverage could be pretty nice. If he wants to go with like Z Waterfall or something like that to do maximum damage to something like Metagross would be pretty nice. But otherwise, I think just Boff has some better choices here. So I'm actually going to be picking Iron Boffin to win this game, despite the fact that his record's may be a little bit worse than Drew's. And Drew, actually, he really needs this win in order to maintain his playoff contention. So he might be a little bit, he might have more desire to win this game, but I just think that the matchup is not in his favor. So it looks like we've got 4 analysts and fans going in favor of Iron Boffin along with me, and then the other 7 are going in favor of Drew. It looks like you're going for Drew as well. I know that Drew's your boy, so I know that you're got to be in his corner this week.
Yeah, dude, I'm a little torn. I'm Drew's boy, but I'm also Iron Boffin's boy. I love Boff to death, and once again, I love his team in general. It's definitely something I'd draft. But Drew's just had a lot better of a season. Plus, I like to see things get really close in the playoff potential. So between him and Vivid, I would love to see it get like straight down to differential when it comes to records and everything like that, and really see him like try and fight for it, because better playoffs is always more ideal. So I like to see the people who want to try and earn it more. So I just want to see Drew kind of pull through and see if he's able to make it. And that's really just all it comes down to. Unfortunately, I love Boff, but he doesn't have a playoff connection. So I am trying to vote in favor of the people that do have a chance. For the next match, we have the Tennessee Trubbish, coached by Deathly I Am, going against the New Orleans Pelicans and Pokemon. For this match, it's really difficult for the New Orleans Pelicans to use their MVP in Diggersby. Diggersby has been very solid throughout the season. However, Celesteela, Kofagrigus, and Rotom-Mow really hinder Diggersby. John typically, of course, likes to lock this Diggersby into a lot of moves. Really can't do that because of the ground immunities in Celesteela and Rotom-Mow. And of course, you have the normal ability and Kofag, but Celesteela is basically almost immunity in itself if you run it defensively, because that's not going to be doing much, even with huge power. So you have to be really aware of that. But in general, Diggersby is just left on the back foot, which is really difficult for them to deal with. But one thing that can capitalize this week that the Pelicans have been doing well with in general is Mega Diancie. I feel like that's very solid here because there is like no rock resist. Celesteela is of course really fat, so you have to be aware of that. But if you are able to weaken it, you might just be able to continuously just click like Diamond Storm with Mega Diancie and be able to win with it, so that's going to be pretty ideal. You might be able to set up like Rock Polish late game if you weaken enough of the Pokemon. He definitely is known for switching out a lot of his Pokemon, just letting things take too much chip when he doesn't need to, when he can make a stack and everything of the sort. So as long as you're able to set up that Diancie, it's going to be pretty solid in the long run. Life Orb Greninja is going to put in plenty of work. Yes, you have a nice bulky Vaporeon in the back for the New Orleans Pelicans, but he's still something very dangerous because if you get like just a few flinches with Dark Pulse, it's all over from there on out. Basically, all you need to do is like stab with Hydro Pump and Dark Pulse, potentially Water Shuriken for like priority, so you not have to worry about like a Bandit Quick Attack Diggersby or like Rock Polish Diancie, so you have that in the back. That'd be pretty nice. Or just sub Diancie, hitting it multiple times will be ideal. Then you can run like Ice Beam for Mensch, will be pretty solid, and then you're still able to hit Toxicroak. But if you really wanted to, you could hit Toxicroak stronger with like Extra Sensory as one of the moves on Greninja, which could be potentially ideal if you're really worried about a setup Toxicroak. Other than that, I see an Eviolite Magneton being pretty solid. One, it's a great trapper for Celesteela, but two, you can also make it to where it's not a trapper, because of course Wi-Fi doesn't tell you like Showdown does, where you can try and freely switch. You either switch or you don't, and then it's kind of a little bit annoying, but it's a big risk switching generally. So you can run Analytic and get off a lot of damage, which would be pretty helpful versus some of the opposing Pokemon such as Gligar, but you can easily run HP Ice for Gligar in general, which wouldn't be that bad. Eviolite Magneton also helps with Greninja a little bit, I'd say. You're not really going to be taking a Drillbur, of course, against the Mega Beedrill, so that's a little bit of whatever, but it also really helps you versus that Rotom-Mow, which in general I feel like the Pelipper's really struggle with like very strong offensive grass types, so you have to be aware of that. And just the general Magneton speed really helps versus Pokemon such as Ambor, Celesteela, and all that. So in Overall, I decided to have to go with the New Orleans Pelicans this week, and as for the analysts, it was a clean sweep for John and the New Orleans Pelicans with the lock-in for JV Westside as well. While you guys at home actually had the biggest vote for the New Orleans Pelicans this week and locking in John, I believe it was a majority vote of 84%. So CJ, is there anything else you'd like to add to this matchup?
No, not really. Well, I guess I have a few things. Yeah, I like the call out of the Diggersby not being as potent in this game, but I think it would still have some good function if he brought like a Fire Z Diggersby. So that way when the Celesteela switches in, he can hit it with a very powerful Fire Z move coming off of a Fire Punch. And then with that out of the way, the Diancie that you called out has a lot of potential. Pretty much the only countermeasure for that is going to be the Water Shuriken Greninja. So like beyond that, like this pick really just came down to records. Tyler hasn't really been able to get any momentum this season, while John, on the other hand, is locked in for playoffs and is feeling pretty comfortable. So I think that's the main reason why I and probably some other folks decided to go with John this week. The next one's going to be between the LA Spice and Kekre versus her opponent, the Pittsburgh Pichus, coached by Numb Nexus. I am going to be picking Nexus in this game, but it's always so hard to pick Nexus in this league because his team is just so awkward. Like, it just doesn't have like really much offensive presence. Like, he's like forced to be so bulky in most of the games, and I think that's going to be true here as well. Like an example is Gudra with Assault Vest. I think is going to be very important, just because it's pressure to check the Ninetales, the Mega Houndoom, the Starmie, things like that. I wish he had a better way to heal up Gudra than like Wish on Clefairy, because having that thing at as much HP as possible would be really nice. Mega Medicham, yeah, it's like a little bit nice to spam Fake Out in this game, but it's otherwise not the best matchup for it, just because High Jump Kick isn't like that spammable. Like Mimikyu, you have to be very careful of Mimikyu coming in a High Jump Kick. Giving that thing basically a free setup opportunity would not be ideal. And then, you know, you can out prioritize that. Well, I guess you're probably going to have Bullet Punch option on the Medicham, but if he wants to go for like Zen Headbutt instead for like for, you know, just maybe that cover switch-ins better, like he makes himself vulnerable to Shadow Sneak. And then besides that, like Crobat and Starmie can both kind of come in on High Jump Kick. Crobat a little bit better than Starmie. Then they can both threaten back with very powerful moves, especially the Crobat. You know, obviously having the super effective Brave Bird option. So I'm not exactly sure what the offensive win con is going to be for Nexus, but obviously he's figured it out to get to the point where he is in this season, having a 5-6 record. So we'll have to see. The only other thing I want to call out in this game, I actually like the Swords Dance Mawile quite a bit coming out from Kekre. It's too bad that it's not Mega, but like SD Mawile with like Life Orb and Sheer Force actually is pretty spooky because the dual stabs are pretty nice. If he chooses to run, like he being Nexus chooses to run like Fat Swampert and Fat Tangrowth, like both Play Rough and Ironhead have a lot of potential there. Sucker Punch is really nice for doing good damage to Medicham, Zapdos, Magmortar, things like that. And it also offers a super effective option versus the Doublade, which otherwise walls the stabs. So we'll have to see if that one comes or not. Regular Mawile doesn't always have the same setup opportunities that Mega Mawile does, because it doesn't necessarily force switches the same way. It doesn't have that tiny bit of extra bulk, but we'll see. Yeah, like I mentioned, I am going to be going in favor of Nexus here, just because I think he's you know, proved to have some more success this season. Although I still don't quite imagine how that's even possible with his team. But you know, you got to give him credit where credit's due for being able to do this well. And it looks like it's fairly even. It's maybe 5 coaches and 5 analysts going in favor of Kekre, and then 6 analysts plus the fans going in favor of Nexus here. It looks like you're on the Nexus bandwagon in this game, Ben.
Yeah, CJ, I'm in the exact same boat as you. It basically just came down to records. I'm not a fan of Nexus's slow, bulky team either. It's probably one of the ones that I honestly greatly dislike, but it's just not my playstyle, so that's why I'm not in favor of it. But he's been playing pretty fine with it, in all honesty, so that's why I have to go in favor of him, even though I do like Kray's Sun team in general. Mega Houndoom and Sun is always terrifying, and you have that very solid Porygon too that I always like to see put in work. I just had to go in favor of Nexus purely because of record. That's all it came down to. For the next match, we have the Free State Torcats, coached by Duncan Can't Die, going against the Bronx Bearticks and Pokemon MD, or Joey. For this matchup, Quiverdance Volcarona is looking pretty solid, especially with Fly Z on its side. Just stabs with Hurricane, and that Fly Z can potentially just win, in all honesty. When it comes down to it, of course, you need the solid hazard removal to support Volcarona because of its 4x weakness to rocks. You don't want to be bringing that thing in on 50% and then trying to set up. That would be very unfortunate. And also, Joey really needs to capitalize on the perfect moment to potentially set up, because only a few things can run like the physical rock coverage in order to capitalize on Volcarona, or just like try and status it so it's not able to potentially sweep. You just really need to capitalize on that. One thing that could support Volcarona pretty well is a Banded Kabutops. Overall, I feel like this actually puts in a lot of work physically, and the main checks being Ferroseed and Lurantis, which both are free setup for Volcarona, which is very important. So as long as you're putting in chip and then you're just sacking Kabutops, you could potentially just get in Volcarona and win. So you have to be aware of that. Kabutops also is able to provide you a spinner, which is very important. Once again, getting rid of those rocks, like I mentioned, that are really hindering Volcarona in most matchups, so you have to be aware of that. Mega Glade also has a great offensive matchup. It just has to be aware of course, the Blacephalon in the back. And I do believe the Blacephalon is the main win con for the Free State Torcats when it comes down to it. Like Calm Mind Psychic Z has a great matchup. Of course, you have to be really aware of like an Assault Vest Crocodile or just a bulky Crocodile in general, especially with Pursuit, because you're not able to switch out. Blacephalon's so weak defensively that one Pursuit from Crocodile is just going to knock it out, I do believe. But you are able to capitalize on like a bulky Peck switch in if you do have that Psych Z, especially if you're able to get that one free Calm Mind up. So you just have to be aware of that, but overall I feel like the matchup is more in favor of the Bronx Beartics. Not only do they have the better matchup, but they have the better record overall. Joey has been killing it this season, and I'm really looking forward to how well he's going to be playing in playoffs. And when it came down to it, every analyst decided to vote in favor of the Bronx Beartics, except for its Sock actually voting in favor of the Free State Torcats and Duncan, and actually locking in that game, which is pretty crazy. While you guys at home decided to vote in favor of the Bronx Beartics as well. CJ, do you have anything to add to this matchup?
Not really. That's a really bold lock coming out of Sock. Duncan's had a pretty nice season, definitely surprising for me. I didn't think he'd necessarily be in this position, but I think locking him against the undefeated team, you know, the 11-0 team coming into this week, that's like some Biff Tanner, like going into the future, stealing like the Sports Almanac type of stuff here. Like that's like the level of boldness that's going on with this pick. I like the callouts that you made with like the Volcarona trying to be the win con. Blacephalon can definitely be pretty spooky. We'll have to see, maybe like Scarf Crocodile comes to make sure that you can always have like an option to revenge kill the Blacephalon. It also would work nice for like Calm Mind Jirachi, so we'll have to see. I definitely think that Joey's going to be favored in this game. In my last game of the week, we're going to be having Automatic and the Nuzleafs going up against the South Texas Stabilized, coached by Invivid Color. Right off the bat, I do notice a couple of pretty solid Hawlucha checks on Automatic's side, mainly the Clefable and the Slowbro. To a lesser extent, Volibee kind of deals with Hawlucha. Not deals with it, but it can take like one high jump kick, like take like maybe 75% or so from a +2 high jump kick. Volibee is also kind of nice for Mew, just being able to force it to not run like Mono Psychic. It's basically forced to run like an electric move or an ice type move to do the most possible damage to Volibee. So we'll have to see how that goes. I think defensively overall it's looking pretty decent for Auto. His best offensive win cons are probably like Choice Specs Tinted Lens Mega. It just you know, basically 2-hit KOs something anytime it comes in. He just basically like needs to keep his checks to Hawlucha alive, because Hawlucha has got to be a pretty decent way to revenge kill Specs Mega. And then like for Noivern, which is the other good option for revenge killing the Mega, just keep something like AV Raikou in the back and you'll be able to deal with that no problem. Maybe he tries to win with like Trick Room Slowbro in the late game with like Scald Psychic and Ice Beam. But I think that overall that Mega is going to be the top tier threat. For Vivid, like I mentioned, I don't think that the Hawlucha is definitely his best way to go, but I do think like Life Orb Sneasel with low kick is pretty good looking here to hit that Cobalion. Otherwise, the stabs just don't look that amazing. Maybe you put Poison Jab in the last slot just to do the most damage possible to Clefable, which could otherwise be annoying. I think the best swing con, low-key, is like a Flame Charge Rapidash. You put Throat Chap and High Horsepower onto that to do maximum damage to like Slowbro, Latios, Salazzle, things like that, and it kind of just wins. He just doesn't really have a great response to it. He just basically needs a little bit of chip on Clefable, maybe get the Clefable to like 6% or so, or sorry, 60% or so. And then like that Volibee probably needs to be chipped just a tiny bit. Camera up to probably switch it in twice on rocks, and then that sort of Rapidash goes in. So I'm going to be picking Vivid in this game in his South Texas Stabilize. It's looking like all of the analysts and fans are going to be doing the same. I don't think that that necessarily represents how, like, I think the matchup is closer than that, but I do generally agree that I think that Vivid's going to be favored here. Ben, do you have any thoughts on this game?
No, you great analysis for this matchup, but in general, Vivid's just been doing more solid than Automatic has been doing this season since Auto's taken over the team. It's also hurts him a little bit when he's trying to compare it to Uzi Gunner, who took up at the same time, but has been performing a lot better when it came down to it. But when it comes down to it, like, it's just, there's so much speed on the Nuzleafs, and then it just cuts from 95 to 60, and then the bulk's pretty good, but it's still, like, not the best offensively, and I'm just not a fan of it. It's like, it's really awkward with that gap. Vivid overall has been doing very solid with his, like, offensive form of the team and abusing it, and I definitely feel like a very solid Muse set's going to come out here, like, especially offensive set that might be able to break majority of that fat with its coverage and everything. And for the last game this week, we have the Milwaukee XBucks, coached by Magnitude, going up against the Newcastle Nidokings and Patters. For this game, Mega Swampert has a very solid matchup with limited switch-ins, but it has to respect the Scarf Coco because it can get the outspeed even in rain and provide the Grass Knot in order to hit Mega Swampert super effectively, and that's going to be doing a lot of damage. If you run it slightly bulky, I'm pretty sure it can't pick up the KO, but it's still something you have to watch out for because Mega Swampert's not going to be wanting to take the chip unless it really needs to, so you have to be aware of that. I would really like to see a Power Herb Solar Beam Magician Delphox. Pretty sure I said that all right. But so you can use the Solar Beam and then you can potentially steal an item. It's going to be pretty helpful, especially if you're able to catch like the Politoed off guard and you get rid of the rain. So Swampert's less of a threat in the later game, especially if you're able to stall with something like Protect. But in general, Delphox actually pressures very well in the matchup. Mainly outside of rain, but it's still fairly solid in rain. Of course, you're not going to be hitting things like potentially Chestnut and Scizor, harder with your fire type stabs, so you have to be aware of that. Alolan Persian, of course, is something that's going to benefit from the rain because you're not going to be able to hit it with your Psychic Stab, of course, having the immunity and the dark typing. So it's a few things to watch out for, but overall I feel like Delphox is pretty solid. I definitely feel like Mega Gyarados can also abuse the rain. I feel like DD is pretty optional, and then you just have coverage in Earthquake for Quillfish, of course. Waterfall Spam is overall perfect in the rain. There's nothing really too much you have to worry about otherwise. You don't really need your Dark, Stab, and Crunch. And then you run Hurricane. Hurricane is mainly for that Chestnut, and in rain, Hurricane never misses, which is pretty important. So if you run 156 investment in EVs with a naive nature to still give you that speed boosting, it can straight up OHKO a defensive Chestnut, which is going to be pretty important. Now, to be fair, don't know if you want to run that much investment in special attack necessarily. You might still want a good amount in physical, purely to deal with overall threats, but I feel like that Hurricane is going to be pretty important. We have seen Patters bring Hurricane on his Mega Gyarados before, so I'd love to see it again. That's definitely something that could catch the XBucks off guard, potentially. I know Magnitude's a man of heat, so we might see it coming, but it's still something that you have to be aware of. But when it came down to it this week, I had to vote in favor of the Newcastle Nidokings, as did every analyst, as well as you fans at home. It was a clean sweep for the Nidokings this week in Patters. CJ, you actually locked in the Newcastle Nidokings, so you want to tell me why you did that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm mainly just a believer in Patters in general. He's locking up, I think, the last playoff spot in his conference, so... yeah, I've always been a fan of Patters, and I think that he can pull it out this game. Yeah, maybe Steve cooks up something pretty spicy. I do think rain, even though Hippo can reset it, reset the weather, I still think that the weather for Steve is a little bit better in this game. But I think that there's enough there for Patters to take this game.
All right, everyone, that is going to bring us a close for this week when it comes to Week 12. Really getting near the end of it, and there's going to be a lot of great battles this week. I hope you're looking forward to it. And once again, we are going to bring you the updated records of all the analysts and overall pick'ems, hopefully next week once games are completed. But apart from that, CJ, you want to do our weekly plugs for us?
Yeah, of course. And yeah, you guys make sure you go down to the description below. We have links to all of our fantastic coaches down there. We recommend you go to each of their channels, drop a sub, so that way once the battles get uploaded on Saturday, you'll be sure not to miss those. We have a lot of great games this week, lots of games with playoff implications, lots of game with playoff seeding implications, and just some awesome games between some of the top teams in the league. The one that I think I'm most looking forward to personally is the Gators versus the Torterrapins, although honorable mentions go to the Vikavolt versus the Bewares, and then also the Chimp Chargers versus the Scizors. So while you're down in the description below, would really appreciate if you guys checked out the Ownage store so you can get some WBE merch. We have shirts for all of the coaches in the league, and also just some general WBE shirts that you could buy if you choose. So make sure you check that out. And make sure you check out WBE's sponsor, the Pixelmon servers, and Poke Ninja. Definitely would really like it if you guys checked that out. They really helped make this season possible with their sponsorship. And yeah, Minecraft is definitely going through a little bit of a resurgence. I caught a really cool trailer from Gamescom last week where Minecraft had like some ray tracing support and just made the graphics look really awesome. I wonder if that's coming to Pixelmon or not. So yeah, I think that's going to basically wrap things up for the plugs. Really appreciate your guys' support. Thank you as always for coming in and checking out these videos, making it possible for us to bring you this great content. We have a lot of fun doing this for you guys. So yeah, thank you as always. And I think that's going to wrap things up for this week. So I'll go ahead and sign off and say see you next week.
Deuces.